Hey everybody, welcome to the fourth and final workshop of our mentor program. I am so sad that this is our final workshop, but I'm so excited for you all to jump into this final workshop. We've got a lot to cover this evening. We've got an amazing guest speaker for you this evening. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Now, this workshop is all about how to make the most out of that first internship. How do you make the most of that first internship or first job? Maybe you're jumping into a full-time job, you're a senior, you're graduating, maybe you're hopefully jumping into an internship. Even if you're not jumping into an internship, maybe you're working on a part-time job that you want to make the most out of for the summer. That's okay too. This workshop is all about how can you make the most out of that first opportunity over the summer so that you can really set yourself apart. By the way, if you have a part-time job and you don't have an internship, there are plenty of ways that you can go about setting yourself apart in that part-time job that could lead to internships down the road. Seriously, do not settle and do not sell yourself short for the network that you could create from any particular opportunity. I know that I could tell you that back in the day when I was a server and bartender, I met plenty of people that ultimately opened up doors for opportunities that I ended up taking advantage of later. You never know who you will meet, even in the jobs you think are not your main thing. It's understandable, but leverage it. Don't ever write any potential connection off. So, as you all know, my name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. This workshop's going to be about 50 minutes long. Please ask any questions you have. If you have any questions in the comment section, as you all know, I'm gonna ask 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Your job is to answer them within 24 hours of this workshop going live. I don't necessarily know exactly what the questions are going to be. I always prompt them based on our guest speaker. Sometimes I'll slip in an intro question during this segment here. It just depends how I'm feeling for the day. So I'm so excited for you all to jump in, learn from our guest this evening. I'm so excited to learn your answers to the questions that we ask you, and I'm so excited to engage with you all. Now, I really want to set the expectations. As you all know, you're not going to get an internship handed to you on a silver platter. That's just not how this program works. Now, by the way, have students landed opportunities at Google, major investment banks, major engineering firms, major marketing firms? Absolutely, happens all the time. But have they done that as a result of meeting with their mentor, taking advantage of the things that they've learned through this program? Yeah, absolutely. But if you think this is going to get handed to you on a silver platter, I think you already know by now that's just not how this program works. You have to work for the things that you get. Now, this platform can be a springboard for you to get to where you want to be. Leverage this as an opportunity to really launch your early career path. Absolutely, yes, this is something that can really do make a huge impact on you getting to where you want to be. But this is not a handout. This is not something that is just given to you. This program could be critical to you really setting yourself apart compared to your peers. Take advantage of it. I really think that you're going to enjoy what we have to say in this workshop this evening. Now, I really want to talk about the intentionality of feelings, because here's the thing. At the end of the day, how you make someone feel in a given moment is going to really impact how they feel about you down the line. So I want you to just take a quick moment on a piece of paper or on your phone. I want you to identify, how do you want other people to feel about you? So when you're going into that first job, that first internship, that first part-time job, how do you want your boss? How do you want your colleagues? How do you want your peers? How do you want other people to feel about you? Write it in the comment section. Write it down on a piece of paper. I want to know, how do you want other people to feel about you? Because that intentionality is so key. It is so key, because here's the thing. If you don't write this down, if you don't set out an intention for how you want other people to feel about you, they are going to perceive you in any which way that you may feel on that given day. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. If you're having an off day and you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, like, I'm having a rough day, you can let that spew on other people. It happens all the time. And people come up with excuses for it. You might say, hey, my dog died earlier today, or I just found out my grandma's got cancer, having a rough day. And don't get me wrong, there's not an excuse for having a rough day, but you've got to be able to realize that as a professional, you've got to put on multiple different hats to get yourself in the zone to make the most out of it. So no matter what's going on with your world, you can't let your personal world affect your business world. And if you do, it's going to potentially negatively impact the way that other people feel about you. But if you set an intention right now about how you want other people to feel about you, you're going to put yourself in a much better situation. If you think to yourself, I want people to think about me as dependable and reliable and someone that's always upbeat, confident and excited when it comes to work, it doesn't matter what's going on with your outside world. Even if the worst thing could have possibly happened in your outside personal world, if you set yourself an intention right now that that's how you want other people to feel about you, when you come into work, you're going to straighten yourself up because you've already identified, I don't want people to feel sad, bad, or like that I'm a charity case because I've got other things going on in my outside world. You want other people to feel like you are a rock, that you are someone that they can go to, that you are someone that's always showing up professionally. Boom. You will get yourself into the mindset ready to be successful. Now that leads to the 3 keys that we cover in every workshop for success in this mentor program, which is strategy, story, and state. And as I just said, it doesn't matter what's going on in your outside world. It doesn't matter what the state of the world is. If you are a rock, if you are someone that physically comes into a state conducive for being successful every single time, you will be successful. I promise you that. So what I want to do right now is I want to get you into a state conducive for being successful. I want you to stand up, and I want you to shake it loose. I want you to shimmy it out. I want you to let it go. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 3, scream 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. You're getting yourself pumping. You're getting blood flowing to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself ready to be successful. The reason why that is so key is because no matter what is going on in your world, you can drive your emotions with your motions. Your motions drive your emotions, meaning that if you get out, you move, you do a power pose, you get crazy, you can get yourself in a state conducive for other people wanting to be around you. You can get yourself feeling good, even if you don't want to feel good. Even if you think to yourself, I just want to remorse for a little bit. I just want to be sad for a little bit. You can be sad on your own time, but when it comes to work time, you step your game up. And the way that you step your game up, you get your emotions and you turn them into positive emotions. I can tell you that right now. Even when you don't want to feel on your best self, your emotions can get yourself into an emotional state conducive for being successful, even if it's only for a temporary period of time. I promise you, your emotions, getting moving, getting running, getting going, getting just shaken out, will get yourself successful. And that will be a huge catalyst for you being successful on the job, standing apart from other people. Because everyone else is going to wonder, like, man, how are you able to stay upbeat, positive, just like a go-to person every single time while other people are taking sick days or just having off days? And you can tell, everyone can tell. It's because you are making an intention to be that way before you come into work every single day. It's critical. Now, the next key is your story. What's the story you tell yourself? Now, that's a big point of the intentionality. What is the story you tell yourself for why you're going to be successful? If you tell yourself a negative story like, hey, you know what? I don't deserve to be here. I'm not qualified. I'm just honestly, I don't even know why I'm in the room. If that's a story you tell yourself, that is the outcome that will be perceived by other people. But if you tell yourself a story, man, I can do this, I can make an impact, I can learn from these people, I can engage, I can be the energetic person who does what it takes, works the hardest to get to where I need to be. If you come in with that mentality, you can be successful. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are you going to do to make sure that you set yourself apart from your peers? Now, there's a few things that we talk about with our guest speaker, but there's a few things that I would love to discuss with you right now. The first one is what is focal is causal. This is popularized by the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini. Essentially, what it means is that whatever is seen is perceived, which means that it is all optics. By that, I mean, if your supervisor, if your boss, if your CEO sees you showing up early for work, working hard on projects, taking initiative, they will attribute the success of the entire intern team to you. But if they see you on your phone, on social media, doing something lazy, just doing things that are not, like spreading gossip at the water cooler, not working when you should be working, anything that could be perceived as negative, if they see that, they will perceive that just as likely as they do the hardworking stuff. So it is really critical that whatever people see about you, whoever you want to make sure that you impress, that they see the type of person that you want to portray, and that they do not see the type of person you do not want to portray. You will think to yourself, man, I wonder how does XYZ person get promoted over another person? I can tell you how. It's that they are seen doing good work while the other people are not seen doing good work. Make sure that you're seen doing good work. In fact, what I always find the most interesting about this research of Dr. Robert Cialdini is its extrapolation to other areas of life. What he's observed in his research is that when cameras, especially in police interrogations, are facing any particular person, whether that be the police officer or the suspect, when the camera is facing the person, one particular person, a jury is much more likely to attribute negative feelings towards that person if the camera is facing them. So if the camera is facing a suspect in an interrogation, the jury is much more likely to attribute guilt on the party of the suspect than they are to think that the cop is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually exist. However, flip it around. When the camera is facing the police officer, not the suspect, the likelihood that the jury is going to think that the cop, the police officer, is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually be essentially the guilt of the person who's under interrogation, it essentially increases substantially more. The point I'm trying to make is that when what people see is what they perceive. So at the end of the day, if God forbid you're ever in a police interrogation situation and you notice that the camera is rolling, at the best you want to make sure that the camera is side by side equally to you both, or not facing you and facing the police officer. It's crazy how much of an impact that has on how people perceive other people. But more importantly, as it pertains to the workplace, make sure that people see you doing good work and not see you doing bad work. It's not a tit for tat type of thing. One bad deed is about 10 good deeds worth. You have to really, really make sure that you're not seen doing anything bad, or you are going to be on the shit list of your supervisor. And that's not a place you want to be. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this theory called the next in line theory. Essentially what this says is that when somebody is talking or about to speak, their likelihood of retaining any information before or after their speech is very low. So if you know that your supervisor is about to give a presentation, or someone that you really look up to, maybe you are about to see a keynote speaker, you're thinking to yourself, I love this keynote speaker, I love what he or she has to say, I want to go up to him or her after their speech. Bad idea. Here's why. People, when they speak, are much more likely to think about what they just said if they just finished giving a speech, or what they're about to say if they're about to give a speech. Their likelihood of retaining any new information is very minimal. So therefore, you need to give the person you're trying to make a positive impression to a leeway period before you bring up new information to them, because that will increase the likelihood that your message is actually going to resonate in their mind. But if you come up to them right before a speech or right after a speech that they just gave or are about to give, their likelihood of remembering what you said, very low. So just something to keep in mind. This also applies to a boss who's giving a speech, any colleague that's giving a speech, anybody who's about to speak publicly for anything. Make sure you don't talk to them immediately before or afterwards, because they're not going to remember what you said. So the last thing that I want to touch on is this concept called matching and mirroring. This is a great key for building rapport in the workplace, especially for someone who's got negative body language. So I think we've touched on this before in the past, but you should not have your arms crossed when you're at the workplace. It conveys that you're closed off and that you're not open to learning new information. But there's a lot of people that have bad body language in the workplace. There's going to be a lot of people that will cross their arms to you. Can you cross back? The answer is yes. And I know this might sound crazy, but people feel a subconscious connection to others that they are similar to. And this can be in your mannerisms and your speed of speech. Not your dialect of speech, but your speed of speech. So if somebody has a very thick Southern accent and you try to emulate that Southern accent, but you don't actually have a Southern accent, they're going to sniff that out immediately. It's going to be perceived as inauthentic. But if someone's talking really quickly and you're saying, I'm going to work on that, boss, I'm going to make sure I get that done, I'm going to work on it right away, they're going to think to themselves like, man, here's a sense of urgency, someone who's really with it. That's awesome. But instead, if you respond by saying, yeah, boss, I will get to it, and I will make sure that I get those assignments complete, they're going to be thinking to themselves, what the heck is wrong with this kid? Like, what does he not like get it? The sense of urgency? It's crazy how your speed of speech is actually perceived so similar together. So if you notice that someone talks really quickly or really slowly, following their speed of speech, matching and mirroring their speed of speech can actually help you build rapport with them. The other key is other body language. So like I said, crossing your arms. If someone's playing with their chin, you can play with your chin. Don't try to be overly obvious about it, but you can do it subtly. So if someone's playing with their ear, you can play with your ear. And I know it may sound crazy, but you can try this with a friend who's never heard this before. Go up to them, see if they've got any mannerisms. Maybe they're using their hands like this a lot. Emulate those hand gestures, and then all of a sudden introduce a new gesture. All of a sudden, maybe start playing with your nose. It could be any gesture, honestly. Start playing with your nose. Do it. First, emulate their hand gestures for about 5 minutes. Then introduce a new gesture. Watch what happens. They're going to start playing with their nose. They're going to start emulating the new gesture that you have now introduced. It's crazy. It's fascinating how it works, but it builds rapport between other people in the work environment. I think those are some really critical tips for you to know. The last thing that I want to leave you with is the 30 and 90-day rule. The 30-day rule is for an internship. When you first get into an internship, this is, by the way, this was, by the way, a Fortune 500 CEO taught me this tip. And that was, when you first go into an internship, meet with your supervisor and ask him or her the question, what did the best intern you ever have do to set themselves apart? On the very first day, ask that question. They're going to tell you exactly what they want you to do to set yourself apart. For the next 30 days, go ahead and do it. Don't complain. Don't ask questions. Don't share any professional goals you've got for yourself. Just go ahead, put your head down, work hard. After 30 days, you have built credibility with this person. You can then say, hey, boss, would you be open to having a conversation? I would love to share with you some of my professional goals. Boom. That's where you share some of your professional goals. That's where you say, hey, I'm interested in connecting with people in these areas or these types of fields or these types of industries. And because you've earned credibility, they will help you get there. Why? Because you've earned that credibility. But if on day one you ask for that and you've earned no credibility, they're not going to do it. Or if they do, they're going to only do it on a light version. You're not going to get the full force of how they could possibly help connect you. That is something that's really critical. 90-day rule is the exact same thing, but for a full-time job. You get a little bit longer to really build that credibility with your supervisor and your employer. So those are key tips. The last thing I want to just really mention is really starting to help you get into a routine. I know that the best way to learn anything is to actually teach it. So what I want you to do is I want you to find somebody. This could be a friend. It could be a peer. It could be a classmate. It could be anybody. Teach them something that you learned in this program. Teach them anything you learned in this program. We know that students who tell at least, we know that students who tell at least 20 people something that they learned in this program, that their likelihood of landing the job, the internship, getting to a graduate degree increases exponentially. We know that the more people a student tells, the more likely they're able to do that. What we've identified as 20 is that magic number. And this doesn't necessarily have to be you teaching them a full seminar of anything we taught. It could be literally you bringing up casually in conversation, like, hey, I learned about this thing called matching and mirroring. It's really fascinating. Boom, that's it. That's one person. Or multiple people if you're in a group. But what we've learned is that the more people you tell, the more likely you are actually going to retain this information, the more likely you are going to actually apply it into your professional life, and the more likely you are actually to achieve the goals you have set for yourself professionally. It's crazy how it works. It's a network effect. It really does make an impact. So I want to challenge you that after this workshop, you go out, you identify a friend, you teach them something you learned in this program, and its likelihood of sticking increases exponentially. I really want to challenge you to do that. This is our final workshop. I'm really excited for what you are able to accomplish over the summer. I would really encourage you to be in the program next semester. You're going to get a new mentor. We're going to have new speakers. We're going to talk about new content. I think you're going to really enjoy it and really springboard your career into another level. I think you're going to really enjoy that. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of this workshop. I look forward to seeing you on the next part.
Hey everyone, welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to dive into our topic of how to prep for that first job or internship. So a lot of you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I've landed the job, I've got the internship, really excited to jump in here. But I think one of the biggest hurdles or traps that a lot of students kind of fall into when they land that first job or internship is, what do I do to stand out? Oftentimes it's easy to say like, oh, I'll just wait for them to tell me what to do and I'll go out and do it. But in the working world, you got to be a little more proactive than that. You need to be a little more autonomous. You need to be able to go out and take care of the things that need to get done. Fortunately, we've got a great guest speaker with us here this evening to talk about this topic. We've got Keith Parry. Keith has a wealth of experience in this space and it's just really good insights on what to do to prep for that first job or internship, just to make sure that you stand out. Keith, thanks for being here.
Hey, Garrett, thanks for having me. This is it's a good opportunity. Like we talked about before the recording started, I think there's going to be some parallels between the ladies and gentlemen that are just coming out of school and me just coming out of the Marine Corps after 30 years and moving into my first job post-military career.
I love that. Tell me about that. Tell me your story. How did you get to this point from, first going in? How did you determine you wanted to go into the military, to going from the military to education to getting that first job? Like, what was that whole process like for you, Keith?
Well, I won't belabor the point about how I got in, but I always knew I wanted to go into the military. I always knew I wanted to go into the Marine Corps specifically. And so when I was in college and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, I decided to take a little detour. I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and I did that. And then I went back to school with a little bit more discipline, a little bit more maturity under my belt, and I went back for my degree. I got a degree in pharmacy from the University of Pittsburgh, and then I did a complete shift and decided to go back into the Marine Corps, which doesn't have anything medical. We rely on the Navy for that. So while I have the degree and I understand the science, and it would give me a great background in science and biology and pharmacology and all the other classes that I had to take, organic chemistry, I didn't really use it throughout my career. However, it did allow me to do a lot of things in my career that I don't think I otherwise would have had the opportunity to do. So I went into the Marine Corps, got my commission, was an infantry officer, an intelligence officer, reconnaissance, and then when the Marine Corps joined Special Operations Command in 2006, I became a Special Operations officer, and I finished out the last 14 years or so of my career in Special Ops. While I was doing my last two tours out of the operating forces, working at headquarters Marine Corps, I got exposed to some of the business aspects of the Department of Defense. I got a chance to work with the Defense Business Board, which are like CEOs and other high executives in a number of large organizations, Boeing, think of the industrial contractors that the DoD relies on. And I got a chance to meet some of those folks. And I realized that's what I wanted to do when I got out of the Marine Corps. But I didn't know if I had the expertise or even the lexicon to be able to go into a business corporation and succeed. So I started looking at business schools, and I very quickly honed in on University of Texas McCombs School of Business. Applied there. It was a bold decision. That was my only application, so it was all my eggs in one basket. Luckily, I fooled them, and I got accepted into the program. And for my first 6 months of the program, it was a 2-year program. First 6 months of the program, I was commuting back and forth between DC and Austin for my classes, which were every other weekend for the executive MBA program. At the end of the first semester, we moved down here. I hit my retirement timeframe. So started terminal leave in December of 2019. And then on 1 March of 2020 is when I actually retired from the Marine Corps. I did it at here in Austin. I did it at the University of Texas, and I got it in just under the wire before the entire world shut down for COVID. So that was fortuitous. But then I finished my degree in May of 2021, and but before that, I had been looking at a number of companies here in the Austin area. In fact, I was looking actually the summer before I started the program at McComb, so the summer of 2019. And I found a number of companies that were very interesting to me, and that's kind of where I'll pick up when we start talking about how I started transitioning really into the role that I'm currently in.
Yeah, let's just dive right in. What were some of the companies that interested you? What about them interested you? How did you determine which one was the right fit for you? What was that decision-making process like for you?
I looked at a number of companies. I mean, Austin is a huge tech center. It has been since I came down here. It was before I got here, and I started looking at a lot of tech companies. There was one in particular called Spark Cognition that has really been doing some cutting edge work on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and they do it for industrial purposes as well. So there's safety aspects to it, there's operational aspects to it, there's security aspects to it. So they do quite a bit, and it's a really, really interesting company here in Austin. They've got a spinoff called Spark Cognition Government Services, SGS. And they were also very interesting to me as well because they're doing the AI work, but they're now doing it for the government. And so I looked at both of those companies. I looked at another one, Valkyrie Intelligence, which is in the AI space as well. And I had a chance to meet the founder and the CEO of that company, and still maintain contact with a lot of the folks that are in these spaces. And then Boeing Venture X is Boeing's venture capital group, and they have locations all across the country. Here's one. So I talked with a lot of folks across a lot of different industries, and I also looked at Lower Colorado River Authority, which is the company that I'm currently with, and they were just very interesting because you think of Lower Colorado River Authority. Well, they do something with the Lower Colorado River, obviously, and people, that's all the further people take it. But it's a very diverse company. They do control the river. They do have dams on the river that they maintain and control to provide hydroelectric power and prevent flooding into Austin, which is why they were created in the first place back in the 1930s. But they also expanded. They now do power generation, power transmission, and they have parks, and they have telecommunications services as well. So it's a very diverse company, and it just really interested me. What kind of drove me to learn more about it is when I was in McCombs in my first semester, we had a course called Leading People in Organizations. And you had to talk to various business executives in order to get their perspective on leadership. And I chose one of the executives at LCRA, and they very kindly and graciously gave me time in order to come over and meet them. And I did. I had about an hour and a half interview with them. It was a great experience. Learned a lot about what the company does. And then at the end of it, I got a chance to meet, just by happenstance, the CEO of the company, who's a fantastic businessman and just a really nice individual, Phil Wilson. And he said to me, he goes, "Hey, thank you for your service. If there's anything I can do in order to assist with your transition, please let me know." And he gave me his card. And the first thing I'll say to folks that are listening to this is realize realize what silver bullets those are. You don't expend those unless you put a lot of thought into what you want to do with those silver bullets. And you're going to meet folks like that. You're going to meet CEOs. You're going to meet executives in a lot of the companies, especially if you go to networking events. They're going to be there. If one of them takes a shine to you and gives you a business card, realize that that's not like carte blanche to like call or email that gentleman or that lady, on questions that you can find by doing a little bit of research on your own on the internet, or by reaching out to somebody in the company, somebody else in the company that can answer those kinds of questions. I used one silver bullet from that gun that he gave me, that business card, and that was when I was applying for a role that I found, and I reached out to other sources, couldn't get a hold of anybody, and I said, "I'm going to fire one of these silver bullets." And I sent him an email and said, "Hey, I'm applying for a role in your company. However, I'm still in Virginia, and I have to be honest on my application, say that I'm still in Virginia. But and I know that I'm coming to Austin in about another month. In fact, less than a month, I'll be down there. But I don't want to get put into the bottom of a pile or put into the shredder because I'm still in Virginia." Well, 10 minutes later, this gentleman called me and he said, "Hey, apply. I will walk down and I will talk to HR tomorrow, and I will let them know that you are en route to Austin, because you and I both know that." So that was the only time I used that silver bullet, but it was well worth it because it got me on the radar, not so much with the CEO, but with the HR department and with some of the other executives in LCRA. So it was a good use of that silver bullet that I got. And it's something that you have to realize that when you get those kind of things, use them sparingly, use them strategically, but they are there to use. I mean, and quite honestly, the people that give them to you expect that they're going to be used. They just don't want to be inundated with nonsense that you can find out just by doing a little bit of research on your own. And coming out of school, you have the tools, you have the resources to be able to do this kind of research, so use it.
I love that. I love this etiquette component of how to leverage the business cards of leaders that you want to build a bigger and deeper bond with. And I think that there is some other key etiquette pieces here. So you touched on hey, don't abuse it. So that's one side of the coin. I think a lot of students fall on the total opposite side of the coin of like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not even in a place yet. And so they choose inaction over any action, because they're assuming that they're way too busy for me. They would never want to email me or follow up with me. And I also think there's a time component of it. Like if you get this business card and then you hold on to it for 5 years and then wait to like cash it in, this person's not going to remember who you are. They met you 5 years ago. So I think, I mean, and Keith, I'd love to learn your thoughts on this, but I think that there's similar to having produce, there's there's a time warranty for when it's still good, and after it's not good, the person's forgotten who you are.
There's a lot to unpack in that statement, and you're absolutely right, Garrett. 2 points that I'll bring up though are the timing component is important, and the one thing I'll say is not using one of the silver bullets. That after you have that kind of meeting, that introductory meeting, it's perfectly appropriate, and I would say even expected, to send a short thank you note to that individual.
Smart.
Hey, Mr. Wilson, it was very nice to meet you. I really enjoyed learning more about LCRA, and I hope that we get a chance to talk sometime again in the future. Something as simple as that. That goes a long way to keeping you on that person's radar, so that when you do reach out in the future, and it can't be too long, you're absolutely right, but when you do reach out in the future, they're going to have remembered that, and you're going to have a positive impression. Now, they could remember you as well if you don't send them a thank you note, and they could be like, well, I gave this guy my card. He didn't even thank me for it. I mean, he thanked me when I handed it to him, but he didn't do a follow-up thank you, which quite honestly is expected. And then when you send him the next email, now asking him for like an informational interview or for a particular bit of information, etc., that will have an impression as well. So, you never get a chance to make that first impression, or you only get one chance to make that first impression. Use that, and that doesn't count against you as a silver bullet. The second point I'll make is informational interviews where you're not asking for a job. You don't even bring up a job. You just want to call and ask them for information, detailed information about their company. And that's perfectly appropriate as well. And that would be a good way to use that silver bullet. Because if you do your research and you're not calling to get encyclopedic information that you could find on their website, but like I'll give you an example. So one of the things that I found is extremely useful, and I'll make an assumption that at least some of the people that are listening to this broadcast are going to be business students, so they should have some understanding of how to research and find a financial statements on a company. Now, publicly traded companies, you can go to the SEC and pull down their 10K or their 8Ks, and you can find a lot of great information in there in both of those, the annual 10Ks or the current event 8Ks that they have to file with the SEC. Private companies don't do that, and they normally don't release their financial statements. Some companies do, some private companies do, and if you can find those by digging into on their website, they generally have an area that's called financial information. Dig in there and you should find it. But that is a great source of information. It's not just profit and loss or income statements or cash flows or anything like that. There's a lot of detailed information about the organization and the setup of the company. And you can read through that. And I'm still old school, although I've converted a little bit to new school. So I use my iPad to read everything. That's how I did everything for McCombs. But I'm still like taking notes in the margin on my iPad. I'm just not doing it in a physical book anymore. So I'm kind of a technology savvy caveman. That's what I like to consider myself, but it works. So you take a lot of notes, and when you have that meeting, you can ask some specific questions. Hey, I'll just use John. John, I was doing some research on your company, and I found something in your financial statements that I wanted to kind of ask you a question about. Well, one, he's going to be impressed that you looked into their financial statements and you started reading through it, and that you formulated a cogent, intelligent question from that document that you found. And quite honestly, I mean, I pulled a number of my questions from that, and it was, one, interesting for me because it was truly something that I didn't quite understand, and two, it showed that I had done quite a bit of due diligence in digging in and doing some really highly detailed research on the company. So using one of those silver bullets for an informational interview, but you need to have your ducks in a row. You need to have a little agenda set up. You need to have your questions formulated. You can do some on the fly, based on whatever the person you're interviewing brings up, but you need to have everything prepared, much like you would for any job interview. So this is an informational interview, not necessarily a job interview, but it will you don't even necessarily need to bring up like, hey, do you have a job for me there at your company? They're going to get the gist that you are looking at their company heavily. If you've invested at a level of research into their company, and they may bring it up themselves. Hey, what would you be looking for if we had a role for you at company X? So that's how they're going to let them open that door. And 9 times out of 10, they will do that.
I love that. That's a great advice. I think a lot of students get in their head, they think like, oh, well, they think I'm digging too deep, or if I get the financial statement and like I know about it, maybe I'll know things that they don't know and I might embarrass them. No, that's not it. And if anything, even if the person you're speaking with doesn't know about some of the financial statements that are publicly held and are put out there, it shows that you did your like you don't need to talk about yourself to get other people interested in you. Your ability to ask intentional, relevant questions will show enough to that person who might be a hiring manager, might not be, doesn't really matter what their role is, to whomever that is, to say, whoa, this person is serious and legit, and I would want them on my team or on a team at this company. Let me pass you to the right people because you've got great questions. You clearly do your research. You're clearly interested. So I'd love to take a moment to ask the students a question beyond just Google searching. What is the way that you would like to do additional backgrounds research on a prospective client or a prospective company that you may want to work for? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. So Keith, when you're in your first job, how do you evaluate if the company's the right fit for you?
Well, that can be tricky because if you've done a lot of research, you may still not understand what the culture is at the company. So you really kind of have to get a sense of that when you do your interviews, and that can be virtual interviews, it can be in-person interviews, because they're looking at you from a culture fit as much as you're looking at them for a culture fit as well. So really, until you have some face-to-face contact with them, that becomes very difficult to ascertain, which is one of the reasons why, take me for instance, when I was coming out here, I would have classes on a Friday and Saturday for the first semester when I was commuting back and forth. I would come out here on a Thursday. I would use Thursday to conduct meetings with people that I wanted to meet with, drive around and learn the Austin area, or study for a test that I may have coming up that weekend with my study group. I would repeat the process on the back end on a Sunday, fly back as late as I could, get home, be at the Pentagon bright and early the next morning, and get ready to do it all over again in 2 weeks. Well, what that gave me the opportunity to do is meet some of these folks, even if it was just for, dinner or a beer or lunch or something like that. But I would do a lot of those kind of informational things, informational interviews in a more relaxed atmosphere. And it wasn't necessarily with, the executives in the company, but if I met somebody that was at a networking event or at a trade show or something like that, I'd be like, hey, I'm going to be in Austin in another 2 weeks. Would you want to link up for lunch or dinner or something like that? I'd love to pick your brain a little bit more about company X. And 9 times out of 10, they said yes. I don't think I ever came into Austin and didn't have something going on a Thursday and a Saturday, or a Thursday and a Sunday, where I wasn't meeting people and learning more things about the community, about the company itself, but also just about the larger ecosystem in the Austin area, on what was hot, who was coming up, and things like that. And then from those connections, I gained other connections. So it's the whole networking thing. It's all about relationships. Everything you do is about relationships.
I love that. And you highlight a really interesting point within psychology there. When your time becomes scarce, people will do things to move their calendar around to meet with you. And it's the craziest thing. Like I've seen people, and I've even seen this myself, when I think, or rather, if I say, hey, I'm going to be in town for this day at this time, any chance that you can meet, I'd love to connect. They're much more likely to say yes than, hey, I'm available all the time. When works for you? Because it's almost like you're giving them too many choices. It's like the difference between going to Cheesecake Factory, where they've got literally a book for a menu. You can't choose anything, so you choose the same thing every single time because you literally can't choose. There are too many choices, versus those like artisanal hipstery restaurants, which literally have 3 options for choices. You can do like fish, chicken, or veggie or whatever, and like that's it. you're much more likely to be intentional about your decisions when you've got fewer. It's almost like yeah, the point I'm making is that by giving someone a finite time period to say, hey, I'm in town from this time to this time, can you meet? I think that's powerful, and it creates a psychological desire to want to meet with you during that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. I concur with that completely.
So I think for some students, there's maybe a little fear of failure, or a fear, or maybe some perfectionism. I know I've spoken to enough students where they will wait, they will keep waiting. I've even had students during the semester, well, they'll wait to reach out to their mentor for the program that's over the semester because they want to have their resume ready, or they want to have this duck in a row, or they want to be this ready, or dot these I's or cross these T's. And just, they're like, I'm just not perfectly ready. What is your advice for students that maybe have a fear of failure? How can you help? What advice do you have for students that, might want to need to overcome that fear of failure? Because I think it's relevant not only for the outreach process, but even within the job itself, um, because it may hold them back from getting what they want. What is your advice for helping students overcome that fear of failure?
I would say, obviously, don't try to make mistakes, but don't be afraid of making mistakes either. You're going to make mistakes, and anybody that is going to be senior to you that you're going to be meeting with in a company, if they're any kind of a good leader or any kind of a good mentor, they're going to understand that fact that people just coming, I mean, myself included. I mean, shoot, I was in my 50s, early 50s by the time I got out of the Marine Corps and was starting my first career. So I was going to make mistakes as well. It goes for anybody. You're going to make mistakes when you come into a new environment. You obviously try not to make them. You do your best and you have a game plan, but mistakes are going to happen. And sometimes they aren't even necessarily of your making. Circumstances could have changed. You weren't rapid enough to adapt to the circumstances that changed, and that created a mistake or failure on that particular task. But, and here's the thing that you absolutely have to do. It's a must. You must make it a point to learn from your mistakes, which means that you must first recognize and accept that you made those mistakes. I mean, there's no shame in it. You got to own it completely. Just say, you know what? I did. I screwed this up. I think I know where I went wrong, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna be very introspective. I'm gonna do a hot wash and I'm gonna figure out exactly what I did wrong, but I did something wrong, or I didn't get the outcome that I wanted to. Maybe I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm owning it. So I'm gonna say that I did something wrong until I can prove otherwise. So in order to do this, you got to leave ego at the door and be prepared to have tough conversations where people are going to criticize what you did and the decisions that you made and the calls that you made when you were working on whatever you were working on, whether it was a crisis event, whether it was a project that you were leading, whatever the case may be. People are going to second guess you on it, and that's fine. Be thick-skinned, set the ego outside the door when you go into the meeting room, and then hot wash after every event. What do I mean by hot wash? That's an after-action review. So the event happened. Maybe you still accomplished the task that you were set out to do, but it was really ugly. It isn't the way you envisioned it working out at all, but you still got it done. Maybe it didn't work out. Maybe you didn't meet the mission, or accomplish the mission. It's okay. Hot wash it and figure out what you did. If you took notes during the process, you had a timeline as things either went right or went wrong, you were taking notes. That's the place to bring all these things up and talk with your team that were there. If your boss is available, ask your boss to sit in it as well. And if he can't be there, at least be prepared to give him whatever after action report you come up with so that he knows, okay, I gave him task A. He got it done. He got it partially done, or for the most part got it done, but I'm sure it wasn't as pretty as he envisioned it being. But now he's sitting back and he's thinking about, what went wrong and how he could fix things going forward. That's what's going to impress your boss. I will also say this, though. Be careful who you trust, especially peers. And I hate to say that, but it's true. And I think it needs to be said. I'm not saying be suspicious of everybody, but if you're going to lay out, air your dirty laundry and say, hey, this is what I screwed up. You want your peers that you work with and that were maybe part of the project that you were working on to understand, hey, okay, he's identifying things that went wrong, and maybe they'll think to themselves, you know what, I could have done a better job communicating as well, or I could have done a better job providing him this product that he needed. but I didn't do it. Maybe they'll be introspective as well. But there are times, and I want to say it's, 2% of the people you may come across that will use that against you. So just be cognizant of that. Not saying that it's going to happen. I'm just saying that it could happen, and you just need to be prepared and realize that that's a possibility. But at the end of the day, if you're in a learning organization or an organization that claims they're a learning organization, and you want to continue to learn, then having these kinds of after action brainstorming sessions is a must. You have to do them. And that's how you can overcome this fear of failure.
I love the concept of the hot wash. I think it's awesome. I mean, because here's at the end of the day, perfection is the enemy of progress. You can't make any progress without trying to do something different or new, because you can't discover that this was actually a progression to something new or better because you never tried anything. So to get you to that next point of saying, okay, I've made progress here, you have to be willing to try something different, something you've never tried before, something that may not work, but gosh, if it did, it would be incredible. Because if you don't, you're going to continue to achieve the same results. But I love what you said, because you don't want to be experimenting with reckless abandon. You want to have experiments. And in any experiment, we clearly identify what are the constant, what is the variable element, what are the things that we are hypothesizing will happen, and what actually happens. And then if you end up not achieving the results that you wanted to, or it's ugly, or it's just not as it's clunkier than you would have anticipated, boom, you can learn from it and make it better. And I love the point that you mentioned. Nothing will impress your boss more than having a set process for one, owning the mistake and learning from it, so then you can be better for the future, because mistakes happen. We just want to avoid repeatable mistakes. And having a process for experimentation is so big for that. So I just want to ask the students a real quick question here. What is an irrational fear you possess? And when I say irrational fear, it's a normal fear that you possess. I want you to put it out in the ether, because whatever it is that's holding you back, by putting it out into the ether, by putting it in the comment section, you can start the process of acknowledging that, you know what, this is kind of irrational. My fear is maybe if I reach out to this CEO or this business leader, that they might reject me, or they might put my resume in the garbage bin, or whatever. Whatever irrational fear you have, put it in the comment section. I love to see it, because I think that could be the starting point to actually trying something new and doing something a little bit different.
Garrett, I'll say this, don't be afraid of rejection. I mean, let's put it this way. I won't tell you the exact number, but I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the number of rejections that I got when I was applying to various companies. I didn't come out and get this first job. I mean, I looked at a bunch of different companies, and some of them were recommendations based on networking, contacts that I made, based on friends that I have that really thought like I would be a good fit, or that the company would want somebody with my skill sets. And it didn't turn out being that way, which is fine. I mean, that's, part of the part and parcel with the job search. But don't let it get you down. Just continue to learn from those experiences, and continue to drive on, because eventually somebody's going to understand what your worth is, what your individual worth is, and what you will bring to their organization or to their company, and you'll land that role that you're looking for.
Totally. No, I love that. Some organizations have a very good process for this, but some organizations don't. What is the best way for students to ask feedback from their boss? And the reason why I mentioned that is some companies, it's, hey, every month we're going to do a feedback session where I can say, hey, here's what I like, this is what I didn't like. But a lot of organizations don't have a very clear feedback session. Maybe it's just once a year, the annual performance review, and that's fine, but that's not a great cadence if I'm making some bad mistakes that's leading to bad habits, and all of a sudden those bad habits crystallize, and then 4 months later my boss is like, oh yeah, that thing you've been doing really frustrates me and it's not the right way to be doing it. You need to change. It's incredibly frustrating, because you're like, darn it, this habit's already formulated. It's crystallized. It's going to take me a while to undo that bad habit. I wish you would have told me this when I was just doing this in the beginning. So what is the best way to ask feedback from your boss?
I would say directly and tactfully, but even as early as the interview process. Hopefully later on in the interview process, not like one of the first questions that you ask, but like later on, if you get a sense that they're interested in you for this role, ask them, hey, you know, if I were to be asked to join your company and work for your team, what would be our engagement? What would be our touch points? Would I have a weekly meeting with you, an every other week meeting, a monthly meeting? What would that cadence look like? Because I want to make sure that I'm continuing to learn. I also want to make sure that if I'm doing something that isn't in keeping with what your expectations are, that we can solve that as quickly as possible. So bring that up front, and they're gonna appreciate that. Okay, here's somebody that wants to, and you know, I want to get your advice. I want to learn from you. I want to learn more about the company, and I think the best way to do that is from you, since I'll be working for you. They're going to recognize that that's, you know, initiative on your part, asking about that kind of question. So I would say do that right up front, and then using that hot wash methodology that I brought up, like, boss, I know you had me do this project. I got it completed. I was a week late in getting it done. I'm doing a hot wash on this. Would you like to attend, or would you just like to get the report that I'm going to put out on what some of the steps I can take in order to prevent some of the issues or some of the things I didn't expect from happening in the future? So that's another way to go about it. If your boss asks you, hey, I'll have a meeting with you, what do you want to talk about? Have an agenda. Have an agenda set up. So whatever that may be, talk about past projects that you've worked on, talk about future expectations that you have, goals that your boss should be laying out for you. So have, you know, 2 or 3, or probably no more than like 4 bullet points that you want to discuss, because you may only get a 15-minute meeting. You're lucky if you get a 30-minute meeting. I doubt that it's going to go any longer than that. So have an agenda, have these points ready to go, so that you can kind of drive the conversation. If your boss wants you to do that, if he puts it back on you, have that ready to go. Don't rely on him to do it, because he may just sit there and go, okay, what do you want to talk to me about? And if you don't have something prepared, you're in a bad spot.
That's a great point. I think that's something that I see often with a lot of students. A lot of people in general in their first job is they will say things like, oh, well, my boss doesn't give me enough feedback, or this work environment's toxic because, you know, no one's, you know, telling me what to do or how to do it, and I'm just kind of out here flying solo. And then finally at the performance review, someone tells me that I've been performing poorly, and when I have my meetings one-on-ones with my manager, he or she says, you know, what's going on, what's cooking. And yeah, I'm kind of expecting them to give me that guidance. And so one thing that I think is critical that you brought up is this notion of having an agenda for the meeting. I think that is probably one of the most powerful things that students, or I just think people in general, they think that their boss should be the one bringing the agenda. But if you're the one that's wanting the feedback, and you're the one that really seeks the feedback, you should have an agenda prepared for every meeting with your boss. Because at the end of the day, your boss has a lot of other responsibilities and leads a whole team beyond you, where he or she is having those one-on-ones. And it's very time intensive to create some of those agendas. And don't get me wrong, if your boss is doing that, amazing, that's fantastic. But if you're wanting to get specific feedback on a specific action that you've been taking, you should ask that and have an agenda prepared with questions about what feedback you're seeking to be better at. But
Absolutely.
Keith, I'd love to ask you about distinguishing. I really, the thing I'm touching on is this grass greener on the other side scenario. How do you determine if a working environment is in fact toxic? Like, there are scenarios where, yeah, you know what, this is toxic, you got to get out of here. And you see some people just push through and they work through, and you're like, gosh, you're in a bad situation. You see other situations where you look at it and you're like, okay, I don't know if I'd call your work environment toxic. You know, maybe this one thing happened and it was frustrating. You know, I've chat with somebody about this, but I guess the point is, how do you go about distinguishing and determining what is in fact toxic versus what is something that, you know, it's okay if it happens once, just maybe give that feedback and try to work through it, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question, Garrett. And a lot of the times I would say, if something's easily discernible as illegal, immoral, or unethical, then that makes it very easy to determine whether that, is a toxic work environment. However, if it doesn't reach those levels, that's where it's kind of beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's up to perception of that individual. Some people can put up with maybe more direct, less tactful communication, whereas other people would be put off by that quite a bit, and they may consider that toxic. So it all depends on what your level of comfort is with certain behaviors of your boss, or others that you work with. Your coworkers can make for a good or a bad work environment as well. I will say this: I learned early in my Marine Corps career that I should always have a little notebook on me. I carried one around with me everywhere I went, either in my left breast pocket or in my back pocket if I was in civilian clothes or different kinds of uniforms. And in it, I would take notes on anything and everything. Meetings that I went to. Now with the mobile device, you can do the same thing there. Take verbal notes, take written notes, whatever your choice is, because you can record information on tasks, conditions related to the tasks that you may be given by your boss, reflections that you have after the meeting, questions that you may still have after the meeting with your boss, names and contact information of people that were at the meeting or people that your boss wanted you to meet with on this particular task. So that's a good reason to carry around that notebook. Going back to the point we were making about the toxic environment, the notebook is also good for capturing bad things as well. Things that you aren't, sure about as well. Things that didn't work out like you expected, unexpected circumstances or things that happened along the path while you were working on a project. Also examples of poor leadership or poor management that you want to make sure you write down so that you don't forget about them and do them yourself later on down the road. And quite honestly, if you're asked to do something and it gives you pause for even 2 seconds, like that's probably your gut or your instinct telling you to take a deeper look at this. You either don't understand something or it really does fall into one of those 3 categories: illegal, immoral, or unethical, and you need to take a hard look at it. Because most of the time, even when I was a junior officer, if I got told something, I'd be like, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like I could potentially get into trouble, or I could get the unit in trouble by doing X, Y, or Z that I was just told to do. So I maybe don't understand something. So I would go back and seek clarification. And 99% of the time, it was me that had a misunderstanding, but I wouldn't have known that if I wouldn't have given pause and then gone back and got clarification. But there was 1% of the time or so of my 30 years in there that was like, no, I did hear him right, and I'm not going to do that because that just goes against my moral code. I'm not going to do what they told me to do because I don't think that's the right thing to do. I will still try to accomplish the mission, but I'm not going to do it in the manner that they prescribe. I'm going to do it in a different way that I think is a little bit more in line with the way I should do things. So you have to make that kind of determination, and you can reach out to a number of different, there are assets probably within your company that you can reach out and talk to about things. If you go back to your boss and they still give you the answer that you're uncomfortable with, then seek out somebody else. Seek out your friends. Seek out a former professor. You don't have to give them details. You don't have to give names. You don't have to give anything. Couch it as a hypothetical to get that additional advice that you need in order to make a good decision, one that keeps you out of trouble and also keeps the company out of trouble in case you did misunderstand something.
Yeah, I love that. I think the big point I'm taking away is when in doubt, get curious. It's so easy to formulate perceptions and opinions and thoughts on somebody else or something else without actually asking them. It's like, oh, this person's trying to sabotage me, or this person sucks, or this person hates me, or whatever, blah, 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 blah. It's easy to formulate that BS in our minds when we are not curious. But whenever we're in a scenario, and I love the way that you brought it up, whenever we're in a scenario, we're like, oh, that doesn't sound right to me. I'm going to go talk to that person and clarify. That's the right action to do. Instead, sometimes people will be like, that person's a jerk. I can't believe they'd asked me to do that. Like, this is a toxic place. It's like, well, hold on a second. Ask the question. Maybe your understanding was incorrect. And oftentimes it is. And by hashing it out, you can really work through some potential challenges that can occur in a workplace. So I love to ask the students, another quick question. What is something different or unique that you would like to implement in your next job that you've learned in this workshop today? Post in the comment section. I love to learn about it. Keith, this has been great. This has been fantastic. Your insight, your wisdom has been really, really appreciated. And I love what you bring from a military background perspective into your first job. I feel like it's really relevant. Is there any other final things, notions, insights that you'd like to share with our students before we sign off?
I would just say, be bold, because you're going to be the SAS has a saying, "Who dares wins," and that's exactly what they're talking about. If you don't take the opportunities, you don't take a shot at things, the answer is always going to be no. So be bold, but also do your due diligence ahead of time. Do your research. Okay, take a look at the opportunities that are being presented to you. But when the time comes, be bold. I mean, talk to people. People aren't going to be put off by asking questions or talking to them, especially if you're at a networking event where those things are expected to be done anyway. But if you've done your due diligence and you've done some research, you're going to be able to ask intelligent questions. People are going to remember that, and that's going to pay off dividends either in opportunities for different roles, or even just to expand your networking base. Hell, I'm still doing that. I mean, I'm doing that. I've got a meeting set up this evening and on Thursday evening with some really influential and well-connected folks here in the Austin area. And I'm not asking for anything. I'm just going out to break bread with them and have a beer, and just to maintain those connections and ask good questions. Hey, what have you been up to? What are some of the new things that you're seeing here in the Austin environment? And that goes a long way, because that can point you in another direction that you may not even thought about, but you're learning at the same time. So be bold and always be learning. Don't think just because you're getting out of school that you're done learning. Learning is going to go into everything you do in your job. If you go back to grad school, even if you're just doing continuing professional education, have that learning attitude. And with that, I'll shut up, Garrett.
No, that's awesome. Keith, this has been great. Students, thanks for being here tonight. Keith, thanks for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. See you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.